It's
And
done.
we're done. We're recording, and then Dee, you should now be the host.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, good morning again, everybody, and welcome to our Bible study. Today we are going to continue with the book of the prophet Micah. So we're going to do a little bit review like we typically do, especially for someone who might not have been with us last week. And then we will pick up on chapter 3. So if you remember, as with all the prophets, the most important thing is to realize that they are commenting on events of their day. So we have to know a little bit about what's going on in their world so that we can understand what they're commenting on. So you should be able to see this map of Israel, which is the map of Israel in the time of Micah. If you'll remember, when Micah is preaching, which is in the 8th century before Christ, so 800 years, at least 800 years before Jesus was born, the nation or the kingdom of Israel had already split into two nations. So the northern kingdom, which is here in pink, the northern kingdom was referred to as Israel. And then the southern kingdom, which is this area in orange, was referred to as Judah. So whenever you see references to Israel, it's not the whole nation of Israel, it's the northern kingdom. When you see references to Judah, it's to the southern kingdom. And then you remember that in Micah, he often refers to them by their capitals. So the capital of the northern kingdom is Samaria, and the capital of the southern kingdom is Jerusalem. So again, if Micah refers to Samaria, he is referring to the northern kingdom. And if he refers to Jerusalem, he's referring to the southern kingdom. You may remember that Micah is from the town of Moresheth, Gath. So he is a Judahite. So he's from the southern kingdom. And he is preaching up in Jerusalem. So although he shares with them the same heritage of being Judahites, being members of the southern kingdom, he is somewhat of an outsider because he's sort of like a country boy who's come to the big city. And as if you remember, he got resistance for his message from many of the Jerusalemites who pretty much was annoyed that this outsider, this country boy, was coming into their town and telling them what to do. So that's a basic background of who Micah was and what the world looked like at that time. Just might add to you as well that while Micah is preaching, the nation of Assyria, which is all this area up here where it says Syria, but it's really Assyria, is the whole nation. They're threatening to invade Israel. And they ultimately will invade Israel and conquer Israel. They will try to invade Judah, but they will not succeed at that. And later on, the Babylonians will conquer Assyria, and it's the Babylonians who will ultimately conquer Judah and then exile the folks of Judah from their home into Babylon. So that's the Babylonian exile. I only offer them because you will see references to that in Micah's preaching. So first, before we go to Micah's message, are there any questions about Micah or about the world he lived in at that time?
Hi, Father. No, I don't have a question about, the locational, but I think last week you were kind of talking about the structure of how the prophets, the writings were put down. And I want to make sure I get this right. There was an accusation. I think then you said judgment, punishment, and then hope. Was that kind of the format?
Yeah. So that's kind of the literary format. How
Yeah.
their preaching pans out. It's not necessarily always in that order, but
Right. Okay.
find messages of accusation. Usually they're accusing the king or the kingdom or the people of failing to live according to God's law.
Right.
Then they will pronounce judgment on them so that, you have been doing this, now you have been judged, to be guilty. And then they will announce punishment or consequences that will flow from their infidelity. And then they generally will then offer a message of hope, because God won't abandon them altogether. And it's in those messages of hope that usually those are the messages we read. And that's why people have the idea that the prophets are primarily predictors,
Right.
of the future, but they really aren't. When they give a message of hope, they are talking about the future, because obviously hope is about that which is yet to come. That's only a portion of what they do. Most of their message are the other things: the accusation, the judgment, the punishment.
Yeah, I found it interesting because the first readings are now from the prophet Isaiah, and he's kind of at that point where he's fussing at them. They're kind of accusing them of things. And I remembered you said that they were contemporaries, during the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mean from the weekday mass?
Yes.
Yeah. So the only question I would offer you about Isaiah is, and this goes back to, again, remember how the books are recorded. Isaiah is really 3 separate prophecies. So only a portion of Isaiah is actually contemporary with Micah.
Okay.
And then there's later in time, the prophecies of Isaiah are really being written down by his later disciples. So they're spanning a much larger period of time. But yes, for the most part, Isaiah and Micah are contemporaries. We're going to see that today. We're going to see where some of their prophecies overlap, and that'll be a little bit of a conversation. Okay, any more questions? All right, well then let's look at then the message that we've already heard, and then we will get into the new message. So what we've already covered is Micah accusing both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom of being unfaithful to God. If you remember, at first, it sounds like he's only criticizing the northern kingdom. So he kind of gets the southern kingdom people on his side, because remember, he's preaching in the southern kingdom. So they're all with him because, sure, they want to hear criticism of the northern kingdom. They don't like the northern kingdom. And then, after he's done all of his accusations to the northern kingdom, he turns around and says, but you guys here in the southern kingdom are no different. You're no better. You're doing the same things. So, and then, so his message is really to both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And remember, that doesn't go over well with the southern kingdom. And so there are these dialogues where they're telling him to be quiet or to get out of Jerusalem, that kind of thing. The two main critiques, the two main problems that Micah has is that they are worshiping other gods. So, if you remember here, the idols and all that kind of stuff. They are worshiping other gods, and they are the rich are abusing the poor. And so that's down here. You cheat owners of their houses and people of their inheritance, that kind of thing. So there's two aspects of his critique. One is, sort of against their faithfulness to God in their worship, because they're worshiping idols. And then the other is an issue of justice. They're being unfaithful to God because they are not behaving justly. Okay. And then at the very end of what we've covered, after he talks about how God is going to punish them, he also gives a little bit of a message of hope. And if you remember, there were two ideas that are important for you to remember about his message of hope. First, that God will save a remnant of Israel. And that idea of a remnant is very important for really all of the prophets. It's the idea that God will not, even though God is going to punish his people, he's never going to destroy them altogether. That there will always be a remnant, a group of people who remains faithful, and God will rebuild Israel from that remnant. Okay, so that's one important thing. And then the promise here is that he will kind of regather Israel into a flock. And if you remember, the imagery here is one of a shepherd, and from that flock a king will arise. And because he's using the imagery of a shepherd, if you remember, David, the first great king, not the first great king was Saul, but the first great king was David. David was a shepherd. And so the reference is that God is going to raise up from among the people a new king in the line of David. Okay, and this, as we later interpret as Christians, see that as Jesus, that Jesus was in the line of David, and his kingdom is more of a spiritual kingdom. But back then they were expecting a regular king because their own kings had been unfaithful. So this is where you get the idea of why didn't people of Jesus' day recognize him as a Messiah? Well, because they were looking for a king. The prophets preached that a king would advance from them, and Jesus was not a king, as we would understand it. So that's the basic message so far. Any questions before we begin chapter 3?
Oh, we were expecting a king. I
What's
think.
that?
Well, I said the way the language is, they were expecting a king because they were expecting what they were used to. So God kind of threw a wrench in the thing and mixed it up and gave us, had us look somewhere else for that king, in a different way. We put that king out there in a different way because we were looking for what we always were used to. It's kind of like now, we always look for what we were used to and not expecting the unexpected, which Jesus was. He was the unexpected.
Yeah. And it's understandable why But that's what I always want to put out. It's understandable why they were expecting a regular political king. As you say, it's what they knew. And there's really no indication in the prophecies that they should expect anything else.
Right, exactly.
So
that's why it was still so hard for them to believe. I'm sure the scholars went back and forth over these prophets' words, and they, some of us, they argued about it. Is this man the king? Is he not the king? Something that we would do.
Well, we're actually going to get to a passage, if we get to it today, otherwise we'll get to it next, which you'll recognize as what the scholars do exactly what you're saying. But we'll get to that.
Before we move, based on what Dee said, weren't the Jews expecting this king to rebuild Israel?
Yeah.
What that was part of. They were expecting this king, we know, to rebuild the kingdom.
Yeah. Okay. So remember, let's look at the prophecy. It's right here.
Right.
I will gather you, Jacob. Jacob is another reference to Israel. Each and every one of you, and I will assemble all of the remnant of Israel. I will group them like a flock in the fold, like a herd in the pasture. The noise of the people will resound. So that's the idea. He's going to rebuild Israel, because he just talked about how they're going to be destroyed. And now he's saying, but I'm going to regather you. I'm going to assemble you from a remnant, and you'll be like a flock. And the one who makes a breach grows up before them. They make a breach and pass through the gate. Their king shall go through before them, the Lord at their head. So that's the reference then. From among them, a king will lead them.
So my king would be something like, I'll be thinking about my king would be something like Saul or David.
Yeah.
And then they would follow the law of the Lord.
Right. Exactly. As you said, there's no reason for them to think otherwise. When you read that passage, there's no reason to believe offhand that the prophet isn't talking about a real king who's going to come and rebuild Israel. We just learn in time that's not what the prophecy was. But I only say that just so, so many times people say, why didn't the Jews of Jesus' time get it? Well, because this is what they understood. And they had reason to understand what they did. They're not crazy. God is the one, as Dee says, God throws them a curveball or puts a wrench in the works. It's not their fault that they knew that God was talking about something different. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to rebuild Israel. Okay, so now in chapter 3, we're going to kind of go back to criticism. Okay, so just realize the tone is going to shift after a tone of hope to now another one of accusation. So does someone want to begin with chapter 3?
Wait a minute, Father. Somebody else just called in. Who's that caller just called in? We had a caller just called in. Could you identify yourself?
Are they muted?
Oh, wait a minute. Let me see. Unmute. Okay, sorry about that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Is Dale?
Yes. 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 I'm just listening today. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Dale.
Right.
Hi, Dale. All right.
Hello, everyone.
Who would like to start reading chapter 3?
I will.
Okay.
And I said, hear ye leaders of Jacob, rulers of the house of Israel. Is it not your duty to know what is right, you who hate what is good and love evil? You who tear their skin from them and their flesh from their bones, who eat the flesh of my people, flay their skin from them and break their bones, who chop them in pieces like flesh in a kettle, like meat in a pot. When they cry to the Lord, he will not answer them. he will hide his face from them at that time because of the evil they have done.
Okay. So that's pretty nasty stuff that he's talking about. So first, who is he addressing his comments to?
The leaders.
The
The
leaders.
leaders.
Leaders and the rulers. Okay. And what's he say about them?
It sounds to me he's saying, you should know better. It's your duty to know what's right and what's good and what's not good. So, obviously you love evil, so you must love evil. But then it's like this is a horrific imagery. It's like these people are being eaten. It's like being skinned alive. It's like whatever these leaders are doing to the people, it's just horrible. It's like they're taking their life. They're just stripping them bare with nothing.
They're cannibalizing them.
Yes.
Right? This
Yes.
is cannibalism.
Yeah.
Do you think they're literally eating the people?
No.
No. Yeah, there's no evidence that they're literally eating the people. But if you think about it, from a symbolic and an imagery point of view, you can't get much worse than eating people. I mean, so the leaders are just really devastating their people. They're treating them as bad as you could possibly imagine them being treated. So it's pretty nasty and ugly stuff, but he's angry. All right. Okay. Continue on verse 5.
Thus says the Lord regarding the prophets, O you who lead my people astray, when your teeth have something to bite, you announce peace, but proclaim war against the one who fails to put something in your mouth. Therefore you shall have night, not vision, darkness, not divinity. Can't say that right.
Divination.
Say it again.
Divination.
Divination. The sun shall go down upon the prophets, and the day shall be dark for them. Then the seers shall be put to shame, and the diviners confounded. They shall all cover their lips, because there is no answer from God. But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and with might, to declare to Jacob his crimes, and to Israel his sins.
Okay. All right. Now, who is this passage directed to?
I think who he considers the false prophets and the ones who are lying.
Yes. Okay. So it's addressed to the prophets. This is what the Lord says regarding the prophets. But they're not his prophets. Because right away, oh, you who lead my people astray. So clearly there are false prophets among the people. And God is now addressing through Micah his critique of them. Any idea of what he's talking about when he says, when your teeth have something to bite, you announce peace, but you proclaim war against the one who fails to put something in your mouth?
When you're hungry and doing bad, you don't like it. When you're eating and get full, you're happy. If everything goes well, you're okay. If it goes your way.
Okay. Okay. So, but you're getting close. But where is the food coming from?
The people.
Yeah, the people who like their message, right?
Right.
Exactly.
The prophets, many of them had to be supported by their prophecy. And so basically, when he's basically saying to these false prophets, when you're getting fed, you proclaim peace to the people. and when they fail to feed you, then you proclaim war.
Right.
And so really you're proclaiming what they want to hear, and you're not proclaiming what God has to say. And so then the consequence is that, you know, they shall have night, not vision, darkness, not divination. In other words, they really are blind. They don't know what they're saying and all of those things. And God will not be with them.
So they're sort of like when you go to get your horoscope and you want to know what the future would bring. So you want a good, when you go to these prophets or these people who can tell the future, because I'm sure there's some people who had the sight. And when they go to these people, they want to hear good stuff. So I'm thinking that's who these people are. And, you know, when they have to pay for what they want to hear. And so they tell them what they want to hear.
So any modern day equivalents?
Father Rich, the first person I thought about was St. Paul. When Paul was among the people, he didn't ask for anything. He worked alongside and did what was necessary. These people want something for their labor. So if I'm going to tell you, give you a vision or whatever, you have to pay me for it. But Paul wouldn't do that. Paul worked along with everybody and made his own way as far as his supplies of food or whatever was concerned.
Okay, but let's bring it all the way up back to the 21st century now. Are there any modern day counterparts that you can think of?
Oh, to these people?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I want to say the politicians, but Trump. That's what I said, just politicians.
Politicians, right? Politicians will tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
But let's not limit it to politicians.
Like we have those people those palm readers and such who we pay.
There are palm readers. But I want to be even more deliberate. There are Christian preachers out there who clearly not preaching the gospel, but they're preaching what people want to hear, and they're creating these huge mega churches.
Yeah.
Because they're preaching what the people want to hear. And personally, for me, I would say the biggest example of that today are the those who preach the prosperity gospel.
I was thinking that, yes.
You know, who basically preach that if you're wealthy, it's because God wants you to be wealthy. And so, if you're wealthy, you're being favored by God. So it's really important for you to do whatever you need to do to be wealthy. And if you keep giving me money, I'll keep telling you how you can be wealthy, and make you feel good about being wealthy. I mean, personally, I don't know how anyone could read the Gospels and conclude from that God wants you to be wealthy and that he favors the wealthy. I mean, Jesus's message was the exact opposite of that. And yet today we have purportedly Christian preachers who have these mega churches who are telling the people, go out there and earn as much wealth as you could possibly gather, because God wants you to be wealthy. So, we still have it today. People who tell us what we want to hear, and we're willing to pay them to tell us that. Now, what's happening here in verse 8 when he says, but as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and with might. Who is me?
God.
Micah.
Micah. Yes, it's Micah. And remember, we talked about this last week. Sometimes it's hard to discern whether the prophet is speaking for himself or whether he's speaking on behalf of God. And so up here, thus says the Lord regarding the prophets, he's speaking on behalf of God. And then he switches and says, but as for me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's continue with verse 9.
Hear this, you leaders of the house of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel, you who abhor justice and pervert all that is right, who build up Zion with bloodshed and Jerusalem with wickedness. Its leaders render judgment for a bribe. The priests teach for pay. The prophets divine for money. While they rely on the Lord, saying, is not the Lord in the midst of us? No evil can come upon us. Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed like a field, and Jerusalem reduced to rubble, and the mount of the temple to a forest ridge.
Okay. All right, now let's first talk about who is he directing this to. So first, it sounds like you leaders of the house of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel. It sounds like maybe he's talking about the northern kingdom, right? Because they're called Israel. But then he's talking about people who build up Zion with bloodshed and Jerusalem with wickedness. Where is Zion and Jerusalem?
They're in Judah.
Judah,
They're in Judah.
Yeah, that's Judah, southern kingdom. So now
the southern kingdom.
he's talking about the southern kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And
For all of them.
it's actually really clever and really shocking what Micah says, because he says, okay, you know, your leaders render judgment for a bribe. Okay, well, we know all that. Politicians always do that, right? You pay them off and they'll do what you want. Priests teach for pay. Oops. I hate to tell you, but you're paying me, but maybe I can get around that. Prophets divine for money. Well, we were just talking about that, right? Prophets who talk you want to hear. And now here's the catch. So while they rely on the Lord, saying, all right, so in other words, the leaders, the priests, and the prophets all are relying on the Lord, saying, well, isn't God with us? Is not the Lord in our midst? If that's the case, then no evil can come upon us, right? They're kind of saying, hey, since we're God's people, nothing can happen to us.
Right.
Right? Now that's what we would call presumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it reminds me of Trump holding up that Bible in front of the church.
Okay. Yep.
Yes.
It's that. The other thing it reminds me of is today the people who say, well, God's on my side. I don't have to worry about this coronavirus. God's going to protect me. So I don't have to wear masks. I don't have to social distance. I don't have to be worried because I believe that God is with me. So no evil can come to me, right?
That's what they say. That's what they say.
That's
what they say.
What's going on here, right? Is not the Lord in the midst of us, evil can come upon us. That is, as Rick Warren would say, that is not faith, that is presumption.
Because God puts things in front of us. He puts things there to help us. And we so dumb we don't use it.
Exactly. He gave us a brain. We're supposed to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yes.
And now here's the shocking part. So you think that because God is with you, no evil can come upon you. But because of you, Zion shall be plowed like a field, and Jerusalem reduced to rubble, and the mount of the temple to a forest ridge. What is God going to do?
Destroy everything.
Yeah, level it all.
He's going to destroy everything. And why is it shocking that he's going to destroy Jerusalem? What's shocking about that? And Zion and Jerusalem are kind of interchangeable.
That's kind of where he lives.
Because he comes from Jerusalem, Judah.
He lives. God lives.
Right.
God lives in Zion and Jerusalem. And where does God live?
In the temple.
In the temple. So
Right.
God is so angry, he's not only going to destroy their capital, he's even going to destroy his own home. And if he destroys his own home, does he still live among them?
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, that's the image is no. I mean, he still will be there. But
Not in his temple.
He's saying, if you are so presumptuous to think that just because I'm in your midst, no evil can come upon you, then guess what? I'm going to leave you and I'm going to destroy everything.
Right.
All right. So kind of angry, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are the parts of the prophets we don't do a lot of reading about. Okay. We read some of it, but this one, for example, I can't think of any mass that this passage would be read at. So again, he's really angry. He's telling them, do not presume, and you hear this in other prophets, do not presume that just because you believe in me, nothing's going to happen to you. You've got to do more than just say, Lord, Lord, right?
Right.
You have to live according to the way I teach. Otherwise, there will be consequences.
So these people, they got to the point where when you read the Old Testament, there's a lot of they took God for granted.
Right.
So
Yes.
it's like that. He chose us. He's going to take care of us. Ain't nothing going to happen to me because he wants me. He can't live without me. So he chose me to be one of his. So I can do what I want to do.
And so again, remember, when you take God for granted, that's the sin of presumption. Okay, you might want to write that down. That's an important thing to know. Presumption. We should never presume that just because we believe in God, nothing will happen to us. Okay? We always need to be sure that we're living according to the way God teaches us. And we always have to be aware that we can do better. So we should never presume that, God is going to protect us just because. I mean, we do believe God will protect us, but we don't presume that. We realize that we have to do our part as well. Okay?
Exactly.
All right, who would like to read chapter 4? Yes.
There's a kind of a joke out where this man is being flooded in his home. The Lord sends a car, a truck, a train, a plane, all to get him. He just kept saying, no, the Lord's going to get me. And when he dies and go to heaven, he said, Lord, what happened? He said, I sent you this, and this, and you didn't get on it. What do you want me to do?
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. That is the sin of presumption and not recognizing what God is doing in your midst.
Right.
So, all right, chapter 4. Who wants to read?
I'll read.
I'll start. Oh, too many people.
Go ahead, work it out.
All right.
Go
Somebody,
ahead. I won't read.
Okay, who's
All right,
reading?
this is Regina.
Okay.
In days to come, the mount of the Lord's house shall be established higher than the mountain. It shall rise above the hills, and peoples shall stream to it. Many nations shall come and say, Come, let us climb the mount of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may instruct us in his ways, that we may walk in his path. For from Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many peoples and impose terms on strong and distant nations. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. One nation shall not raise the sword against another, nor shall they train for war again. Every man shall set up under his own vine or under his own fig tree, undisturbed, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. For all the peoples walk each in the name of its God, but we will walk in the name of the Lord, our God, forever and ever.
Okay. Now, does that passage sound familiar to anybody?
Yes, that's part of that's from Isaiah
Okay, you recognize that.
about the plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks. That's in Isaiah.
Well, actually, even more than it is. So what we're going to do here is it's Isaiah 2:5. So let me read you Isaiah.
Okay.
In the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest mountain and raised above the hills.
Wow.
All nations shall stream toward it. Many people shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the Lord's mountain, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may instruct us in his ways and we may walk in his paths. For from Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and set terms for many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. One nation shall not raise the sword against another, nor shall they train for war again. The house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord.
Wow, that's almost word for word.
Almost word for word, isn't it?
Yeah. So did he steal it from Isaiah?
So what? All right. So now, what are the possibilities?
Well,
He heard Isaiah say that.
Wait a minute, one at a time. Go ahead, Regina was saying something. Regina Pollitt.
In my opinion, he heard Isaiah say this.
Okay, so you say
and sort of repeated his words.
So you say it's Isaiah's prophecy, and Micah is just repeating it.
Yeah.
Well, it could be vice versa.
There's a possibility.
Any other possibilities?
Around.
What's that?
Yeah, it could have been the other way around.
Could be the other way around, right? This could be Micah's
That's what I think, yeah.
And Isaiah is repeating it.
Took it from
Any
Micah.
other possibilities?
That they both got it from someone else.
They both got it from somebody else.
Mhm.
okay? But it's likely that somewhere this prophecy was written down and, you know, got copied over. So we don't know. We don't know. When we read this at Mass, who do we usually read it from?
Isaiah.
Isaiah. So that's
Yeah.
why everybody presumes it's Isaiah, because that's the one we read. But it could be the other way around. It could be Micah's prophecy and Isaiah repeated it. Or as Gwen said, it could be somebody else's prophecy and they both are repeating it. But
Right.
it's clear that whenever you have things that are word for word so close, it's pretty likely that somebody was copying, you know, script from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, does that make the prophecy invalid?
No.
No, not at all. I mean, there's no reason to believe. I mean, in fact, because it appears in both, there's every reason to believe that this is an actual prophecy of God. We may not know exactly who was the original speaker of it, but it actually gives you more confident that somebody really said this if it's appearing in both Micah and Isaiah. And as I said, you have to remember how these things are collected. You know, the prophets themselves, so Micah and Isaiah, they may have written certain things down. Their disciples might have written what they remember hearing them say, and that's how we get some of it. You know, and then maybe somebody collects a variety of writings, and they're not always sure where they came from, and they think this one came from Micah, and they think that one came from Isaiah. You know,
Well, it's sort of like today. I mean, you can go to different churches and you can hear the pastor say the same exact words. You know, so they're repeated. You know,
absolutely. I mean, we preachers steal things from each other all the time.
right?
Yeah. So and again, if I steal something from another preacher and I repeat it at St.Bernardine's, that doesn't mean it's not a valid point, right? It might not be mine, but
Yes.
it's
People quote people like Martin Luther King, a whole lot of stuff. It's good. They keep repeating it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to point out here is that, you know, we're not really sure how all of these things exactly get written down. But this passage, we can be pretty sure somebody at some point said it. If it appears in two places in the Bible,
Right.
somebody said it. Now, let's look at what the prophecy is, because I think it's an important prophecy, and we don't always fully understand it. So in days to come, all right, so that's how you know we're prophesying, right? We're talking about the future.
Right.
The mount of the Lord's house. Now, what's the mount of the Lord's house?
This is the temple.
That's the temple. That's where God lives. Shall be established as the highest mountain. It shall be raised above the hills. So what's it saying there?
So that's like heaven.
Oh, yeah, although it's still a very earthly image, right? But is Jerusalem the highest mountain in reality?
You know, they call it the highest mountain, and
well, no, but physically, geographically, is Jerusalem? Jerusalem sits on a mountain, but is it the highest mountain?
No,
not at all. And so the image now is in the future, God's going to raise up Jerusalem, so it's the highest mountain. And if it's the highest mountain, what does that mean?
You be able to see it from everywhere.
Right. All people will be able to see it, and then they shall stream to it. And many nations shall come and say, come, let us climb the Lord's mountain to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may instruct us in his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. Now, who's going to say all that?
So that starts sounding very Paulist, doesn't it?
Okay, yeah, well, let's just kind of keep it on its own terms for now.
Okay.
Who is going to stream to it? And who's saying, let us climb the Lord's mountain?
For all the other people.
All the people, right?
The people.
The peoples and the many nations. So are they all Jews?
No.
No.
No. So the image
Jews and Gentiles.
is at some point in the future, all people are going to stream to God.
God.
Does it mean that they're all going to become Jews?
No.
No.
No, there's no implication here that those nations will become Jews.
Right.
Okay. What role do the Jews have?
Say that again.
What role do the Jews have, do you think, in all of it?
I think they just have to be the protector of the faith.
They're the protectors of the faith, and what else are they doing?
They're sort of like the evangelists. They're bringing people in.
Yeah, they're evangelists. They're witnesses. Okay, and the whole idea is that when they finally get it right and they're living according to God's law, and all the people see this, they're all going to be drawn to God.
Mhm.
Okay, as they are. All right, they're not going to become Jews. They're all going to stream to God because they're going to be attracted to what they see in God's people. So it's the reason I go is there are two really important points at work here. So if you think about this, what does it mean to say that the Jews are God's chosen people?
It means that they've chosen to share the faith with the world.
They're chosen to, one, be taught to live according to God's law, and then they're chosen to be the witnesses of that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Does it mean they're going to be the only ones who are saved?
No.
No. And so it's very important to realize that the Jews are still the chosen people of God. All right.
Right.
But that does not mean that they're the only ones who are saved. That does not mean that they're the only good people there are. It means that God chose them to be his original witnesses in the world. Okay. And is their job to convert everybody to become Jews?
No.
No. And this is where, I guess, was it Gwen that you said, this is where it sounds like St. Paul.
Yes.
Because this is what St. Paul would tell you, that no, becoming Jewish is not the goal of Judaism. And even to this day, kind of, the evangelization isn't the right word, because evangelization technically means preaching the good news, which is Christian. But proselytizing, let's do it that way, proselytizing, in where you teach other people your faith and you get them to become one of you, that's not really big in Judaism.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's not their main purpose in life. You know, where Christians tend to think that our purpose is to witness to Jesus Christ and to convert people to Christianity, that's not really what Jews think about themselves. Their task is to be faithful witnesses to God's law, and someday that will draw other people to God. Okay?
The way that they live and carry themselves.
Right. So I just want to put that out there, because sometimes Christians, when they hear us talk about the Jews as the chosen people, there are Christians who are offended by that. because, you know, they want to say God abandoned the Jews because they didn't become Christian, and it's really the Christians who are God's chosen people. Be very clear, that is not what the Catholic Church teaches, okay?
Well, it may not be what the Catholic Church teaches, but it's sure a whole lot of Catholics who think that they are the only ones that are saved.
Absolutely. Oh no, that's why I'm going through this. So as Catholics, we believe that the Jews are and still are the chosen people. They were chosen by God to be his original witnesses in the world. Okay, that doesn't mean that they're the only people that God was going to save. That doesn't mean that God loves them more than he loves anybody else. You know, all of those things. It just means that he chose them for a purpose. And it's their job to be faithful to God's word so that others will be drawn to God. Okay, now we see in Jesus Christ the fulfillment of God's ultimate promise to regather his people, you know, under a new king. But that's a little bit different, okay? It does not, the Jews are still God's chosen ones. And they always will, because God never goes back on his promises. Okay, and St. Paul wouldn't believe that. Remember, St. Paul never thought there was anything wrong with Judaism. He was a Jew.
Right.
He just felt that the promises of God were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. But that Judaism, the Jewish people and their relationship with God was still valid. Okay? All right. I don't know if we should start the next section.
But you know, it sure is hard to be a Jew. Most Jews believe you have to be born to be a Jew. But it's hard, you know, I know people have converted to Judaism, but it's hard for them to do that because they're not really accepted because they weren't born in the faith.
Yeah, I mean, so, right. So you can convert to Judaism.
Right.
And people do that. But first of all, it's not a huge part of their practice. So as I said, they don't go out looking for converts. And right, you're right. There's often a level of tension because remember, the Jews don't only see themselves as a people of faith; they see themselves as an ethnicity, as a clan, you know, as a people that way. So
you earn your birthright. It's like it's a birthright.
Yeah. So there's a level at which you're born into it. And so, again, that doesn't mean you can't convert or anything like that, but there's more of a notion that Jews are a people. They're not just a religion.
Right.
Okay. Whereas Christians, we're not really a people. You know, we're a religion. We're people who profess a certain faith, but our ethnicities are all over the place. You know, so, you know, when I talk about my people, that's different from your people. You know, my people are Italians. Okay. Your people are Africans or wherever, you know, you find your heritage. But we're all Christians because Christians are a faith group. We're not a people.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You know, with regard to what Dee was saying, I have a young lady, I call her my school daughter, and her mother is Christian, her father is Jewish. As an adult, she really wanted to become a part of her Jewish faith. And so she did her classes and she went through what we would call a conversion. And now she's involved with a young man who's Orthodox, even though he doesn't really observe the Orthodoxy. However, his mom has concerns because of how she came into the faith.
Right.
And she's concerned that what happens if you have children, you know, so it's very deep.
Yes.
Yeah, now that it's probably more so for the Orthodox. So Orthodox believe in conversion as well, but they want you to be converted by another Orthodox. So I think her concern is who taught her about Judaism and who brought her into the faith.
Right.
And you know, that's still a debate today in Israel. Because, you know, technically, if you are a Jew anywhere in the world, you are automatically a citizen of the state of Israel, right? So if I'm a Jew born in the United States and I want to go to Israel, I can go and become a citizen of Israel automatically. Except, depending on who, if I were as a convert to Judaism, it matters who converted me.
Okay.
So if I was converted by a reformed Jewish rabbi, that ain't going to count. Okay, so that's a huge debate in the state of Israel right now.
I can imagine.
So I think probably, Gwen, that's part of the Orthodox mother's concern. It's not so much that the potential daughter-in-law is a convert. It's a question of who converted.
Okay.
So you know, that is a big issue. So you know, a lot of the stuff still has modern consequences. I think let's stop there right now for Micah, because I don't want to start a new section with only a few more minutes left to go.
Right.
Deep.
So we will continue next time with Micah 4, beginning with verse 6. And we may be able to finish Micah. I don't know. It depends on how quickly we move through some of that stuff.
All right.
Okay.
That's great.
Any questions about what we did today? Any comments?
So I think that Micah 4 verses 1 through 2 is going to resonate with me for quite some time because I really like those passages.
Yeah, we have yet to go to the most famous passage of Micah. We'll recognize it when we get to it. There's probably 2 more famous passages we're going to hit. One you'll recognize and you'll go, oh, I didn't realize that was Micah. But then there's going to be another one that is what Micah is known for. Anybody who knows their prophets, if you say what is the prophecy Micah is most known for, they will be able to quote the section that we're getting to. But that's not for another couple of chapters. So actually read ahead. I don't know if you have been reading ahead. Just go back and read it again. You'll probably come across that passage and you'll go, oh yeah, okay, I know what he's talking about.
Right.
All right, anything else? All right, well then, Dee, I think you have to stop the recording, right?
Yeah.
Can you do that?